Good morning, everyone. We're just allowing a few more minutes for the rest of the participants to join, but we want to welcome you to the June Issues and Insights. We have a great program for you today, so we're looking forward to having some great dialogue following some really innovative, captivating presentations. So we're looking forward to that. Good morning to all of you that are joining. We are looking forward to a great presentation today. My name is Shannon Full, the president here at Twin West. I wanted to just start with a couple housekeeping things while we wait for other participants to join. We're going to start with some presentations today from some of our thought leaders in the retail and hospitality industry. And then we will have a dialogue with Q&A. So as you are on your screen, if you hover your mouse towards the bottom of your screen, you'll see the Q&A section. Click on that Q&A section to put your questions forward to the presenters. If it's a specific presenter that you would like to address, make sure that you include that in, and our moderator will take care of moderating the questions as they come in. We'll just give it 1 or 2 more minutes. As I see the participant numbers are ticking upwards, so we'll be good to go in just a few minutes. All right, I think we're going to get started for time's sake, and we want to make sure that we leave enough time for questions and discussions from all of our participants. So to everyone joining us, welcome. It's great to see. This is one of the first issues and insights that we have done since the consolidation announcement with the Minneapolis Regional Chamber. So welcome to the Minneapolis Regional Chamber members that are joining us as well. We're looking forward to a great day today. Great presentation, a beautiful Friday morning. So we're gonna get started here. How this is gonna work is I will share my screen, and we'll walk through a little bit of the beginning presentation. I'll turn it over to our moderator for Finance and Commerce, and then each of the presenters will share their screens and give you some background information. And then we will have a question and answer time. So just again, for those that have just joined, how we're going to do the question and answer is we're going to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. So if you toggle over your mouse, you'll see the Q&A little icon. If you click on that, that's how you could put your question in. And I would ask that if you are targeting your question or wanting your question directed to one particular speaker, you make sure that you address that. If it's a general question, our moderator will help to facilitate that. So, all right, here we go. So as I mentioned, this is our Issues and Insights program, formerly known as our Legislative Breakfast. Twin West now does this with Minneapolis, and we do these once a month on tactical, practical topics, kind of the most crucial topics that we're seeing in our community. And so we are extremely excited to have you with us today. Here's a little bit of the agenda, as I mentioned, how we're going to go forward with this. For those that I haven't had the opportunity to meet, my name is Shannon Full, the president at the Twin West Chamber. We also are, because I can't see, because we're in a webinar type of a mode, I can't see the individual participants as they're coming on. So we do have a few legislators that are joining us today. Part of the tradition of this program, and actually one of the greatest assets of this program, is that we're able to hear from our local and state elected officials. on a particular topic or question of the day. So in a moment, I will share that question of the day with our legislators. And I would just ask for each of you, if you are state elected official, county commission, mayors, any of you to jump on, introduce yourself and a little, obviously your who you serve, your background, and then your answer to the question of the day. I think that'll be the best way to do this. So, so let's move forward. We do this event, as I said, it's probably the most recognized event of Twin West, and it's really a premier event for us. We can't do these events without the fabulous sponsors and the support that we get from our sponsors. So listed on your screen, the next two screens, you'll see all of our sponsors for the entire series. Mille Lacs Corporate Ventures has been a tremendous series sponsor with us for many, many years. We have sustaining sponsors that include Alina Health, Centerpoint Energy, PCS Human Capital, Rasmussen College, Rudy Luther Toyota, and Velocity Public Affairs. And then numerous session sponsors as well. Our session sponsors include AAA Minneapolis, AT&T, CBiz, Choice Bank, Comcast, Goff Public, Scott Build, and Weber Johnson. Finally, our in-kind sponsors, we've had a great partnership now with Finance and Commerce as our media sponsor. You'll hear from Joel in just a minute. And then our in-kind sponsor is Runway Analytics. So to all of our sponsors, once again, especially at a time now, one of the things I wanted to just mention, our sponsors have been extremely flexible and extremely gracious with their sponsorship dollars as we're trying to reinvent what kind of the programming aspect looks like for the chambers as we go forward. So as I mentioned, here's our legislator question of the day. I would ask again, because I cannot see the legislators in this mode, that if you are a state elected official, county commissioner, or a local mayor, that you jump on and answer this particular question of the day. So as a state legislator, we broke it into two different aspects. As a state legislator, we know that the special session is just opening. So please tell us a little bit about your thoughts on the special session, specifically if there are priorities that you have within the bonding bill or thoughts on the bonding bill. And then as a local elected official, please give us your perspectives on the priorities or the most pressing aspects that you're focusing on as it relates to local businesses in our communities. So I will pause for a moment, and I'm wondering this, this is the first time we've brought the elected officials back in. Victoria, are they going to be able to be unmuted? I just kind of thought of this right now.
Oh, yeah.
We might be doing something on the fly here, so that's what we do when we're.
Let's see.
Let me do this. See, you think you have it all figured out. This is exactly what happens to everyone, right? But so I'm thinking, because we've also switched our Zoom capabilities to a webinar. So the webinar doesn't allow for open participants to comment, I believe. So let's maybe punt on this. Let's see. I am just going through the list. Oh, here we go. Jan Callison, because I see your name first, we're gonna start with you. Okay. So because I'm finding your names on the list. So Jan, can you kick us off while I continue to tap dance a little bit?
Good morning. Well, it's unfortunate to have your last name start with a C, clearly. But happy to answer the question. Bruce, nice to see you again after many years. In terms of local priorities, I would say one of certainly is COVID relief or COVID funding, and that is less for the county, because we received a direct appropriation and a recognition that the cities, the school districts, other entities need those funds. So I'm really eager to see the legislature really hone in on this topic and make some good decisions, because this money really needs to roll to these entities. The second newer issue, again, for businesses is aid to Minneapolis and aid to the businesses that were damaged by the civil unrest a couple weeks ago. So that's also going to be really crucial for localities as well as the counties. I would put those two items at the top of the county's list.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right, let's see who else. I see on my screen Representative Kelly Morrison.
Good morning, everyone. This is Kelly Morrison. I'm state representative for District 33B, which includes 9 communities in sort of the Southwest Lake Minnetonka area. I'm also a practicing physician and in my first term. So boy, we have a lot to tackle in special session. I have several priorities that are specific to my district. One of them is around critical water infrastructure in Spring Park. And I think that needs to be a priority all over the state. Distributing the CARES money obviously is crucial as we continue to try to manage the pandemic. And I would agree with Commissioner Callison that helping the Minneapolis and St. Paul neighborhoods recover.
Great, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
I also see Representative Podine.
Good morning. This is State Representative Mary Kunish-Podine. I represent District 41B. That's Columbia Heights and Hilltop, St. Anthony Village, and New Brighton. Of course, COVID is at the top of our list of priorities, making sure that the funds that have come from the federal government as well as the state are getting out in an equitable manner. I also have been working with the Posse Caucus at the legislature, People of Color, Indigenous, and we have put together the first of public safety and police reform array of legislation. So we are continuing to work on that, to hone that, and are hoping to share the whole packet with the legislature as well as the state as we go forward addressing the civil unrest and the things that you know, the nucleus of the issues that were at hand. I also am looking forward to passing an education policy bill. We ran out of time on the last day, literally. I think we were 5 names short of passing that bill when the clock hit midnight. So Chair Joachim, I'm sure, is looking forward to bringing that back. We have also worked on an education equity bill that I hope to present. And as we look forward to the fall, when all these schools and universities are asking us, what do we do? How do we do this? What is it going to look like? We're still not sure about that. And so addressing and thinking about how we can support our education system across the board is definitely one of those discussions that I'll look forward to.
Wonderful. Thank you, Representative. I believe if I scroll through my the attendee list, I believe that's all the legislators that I see on the call currently. I'm hoping I didn't miss anybody. If you are still on the call and I didn't call on you, please let me know that through your Q&A bar or your chat bar, and I'll be able to call on you at that time. So as we continue to go forward, I will go back to my screen here. And so now we're going to I'm going to turn it over to our moderator for the day. Joel has been a great partner. Finance and Commerce has been a great partner to the Twin West Chamber for many years. We are very pleased to have Joel Shetler with us today. See, Joel, it's not just you, it's me. So we just went over this, all of the names. So Joel Shetler's joining us. We're going to have him take it away, introduce our panelists, and have the discussion. Thanks, Joel.
Great. Well, first, let me thank you for letting me participate. I really appreciate it. I'm looking forward to this conversation as well. So thank you, everyone. Good morning, everyone. I'm going to introduce our panelists, our speakers, and they're going to jump right in and give presentations. But as Shannon said, I'll be monitoring questions at the end. So feel free to ask those questions too. So welcome, everybody. Thanks again for having me. I appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to our discussion. So we're going to hear from three specialists here in this industry. Liz Raymer, she is the president and CEO of Hospitality Minnesota. She's going to present along with Ann Kirby McGill, who is the director of Strategic Alignment for Hospitality Minnesota as well. And then we are going to hear from Bruce Newstad, the president and CEO of the Minnesota Retailers Association. So without further delay, I'm going to pass it over to Liz and Ann, and they're going to co-present right now and give their first presentation.
Well, thank you, Joel, and thank you, Shannon. Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here and delighted to share some information with you. First, we'll just talk a second about Hospitality Minnesota to give you some background. Our organization is a trade association, and we represent, as you can see, the lodging, restaurant, resort, and campground sectors, which includes a broad range. Includes food service of all kinds, including institutional catering. We also serve outfitters, those serving the wonderful Boundary Waters canoe area, and really a great array across the hospitality and tourism industry. And I've been in my role here at Hospitality Minnesota just not quite 2 years, and it's been quite a 2 years. I came in the end of June of 2018. Prior experience includes a tapestry of marketing, advertising, higher education, and most recently was also at another trade association in the healthcare field. So I think that flexibility involved in all of those different sectors has served me well in this role, because it's never been the same day twice since I walked in. Just in terms of the context setting, you see there on the slide, we have had actually 3 associations. So the 3 sectors that I mentioned, also an education foundation and a management company. So we had, until recently, 5 boards of directors, which required 24 board meetings a year. And, again, some of these associations go back to the 1930s. And so it's a long storied organization, but it had always been in these disparate kind of segments. And so we worked, as I came in the door, with all of the boards to come together as one organization. So in January of this year, all 3 groups decided that it was time to become truly one nonprofit trade group. And so they voted in January to merge. And the merger was set to take place on April 1. And how appropriate, right? Right in the midst of pandemic, we're also completing a merger. But it was truly just in the nick of time. We have now created an opportunity to leverage that one voice to represent all of the different interests across this shared industry. And very importantly, as part of our mission is helping our members thrive and survive right now, this pandemic, but certainly business success is the core of everything we do as we look at this very important industry to our state. We also recognize through our education foundation the real opportunity to train young people. And we are currently have educational programs for our culinary arts, our ProStart program, and our hospitality tourism management program that serves juniors and seniors in high schools. And we're in 70 different high schools around the state and looking to grow that program because of the high interest and great jobs and wonderful opportunities to move into a whole range of career paths, management, and so forth. So those are core things that we're really looking at strengthening and taking advantage of as we look to revitalize this injured industry right now. But truly as one organization now, as Hospitality Minnesota, we can move forth and be able to be really effective in that regard. As we look to, if you want to move the slide in, as we think about what's next, looking back, I mean, these last 3 months, it seems like a blur, right? But even in early March, our industry was starting to really see the effects of COVID creeping across the country. as we started to see the screeching halt of all things travel. Certainly that impacted both the tourism and leisure travel side of things and as well the professional side. And we all continue to see that, of course. And now even the stranded cruise ships that were in the ports in San Francisco and Florida seem almost like a dim memory, but at the time trying to get those people off and figuring out what to do was really kind of the start of when we all started considering the really big impact that this was going to have on us. And so all of those things impacted greatly the hospitality and tourism industry. And certainly when the stay-at-home order was enacted, that was something along with the executive orders for the closures of our businesses starting on March 17th, which, you know, as you well know, it's like Christmas for a lot of these hospitality industry folks, where the St. Patrick's Day celebrations are far and wide and certainly are a huge revenue driver for our food service, restaurant and bar sectors. So right away, this had an immediate impact as those businesses were ordered to close. And so it was a big hit. And as we look at our industry, to give you some context, it is a big industry. It is 300,000 jobs. It's a $16 billion a year revenue generator. And it also contributes as a result of that 18% of our sales tax. So it's a huge economic driver for our state to be able to do the programming that we want to do to serve all of our different communities. And right away, as I said, with the St. Patrick's Day kind of closure, we saw an immediate furlough layoff of a lot of workers. And in fact, for the food service sector alone, it was 97%. So it was just the bottom dropped out in an instant for this industry. And so those are the things that have been a real challenge for us as we consider how we can best help our industry and these businesses survive. As we think about this, we looked at we surveyed our folks to find out what was going on in their world as they contemplated what closure would mean to them. And we surveyed our folks in March, shortly after the pandemic hit, and then again in April. And our survey in April was really startling, where we were told that these businesses had 1 to 3 months to survive. They run on very tight margins. There's not a lot of money in the bank to keep them afloat without any revenue coming in the door. And over 50% told us they would probably face permanent closure within 3 months. So that would be July. And so we were immediately dispatched to try to work towards helping them on a number of different legislative issues. Certainly, we also were looking at the new paradigm in the food service industry of takeout, delivery kinds of paradigms that people immediately had to figure out how they could turn and pivot on a dime to make their particular model work. We know that the lodging folks also started to look at what they could do. Resorts and campgrounds were already starting to wonder if they were going to have a season, especially since a lot of these were not designated as essential businesses to keep operating. And as we all know by now, the small business sector has been inordinately hit here because they have been mostly shut down during this entire time or very moderately continuing to operate, while a lot of our big box folks are continuing to have lots of people in the door. So there was a lot of consternation about that conundrum, as well as they considered what they could do to keep afloat. We were looking at all kinds of relief for economic injury. The DEED program came out to offer some emergency loan support, but quite honestly felt short because it was only open to restaurants as they were designated in that essential category, but it wasn't open to some of these other sectors that were damaged as well, with the shutdown and cancellations coming in by the droves. So that's something that we started looking at right away, what we could do to support our members and increase the funding in that program, and also enable more of these businesses to have access to funding. We also were working on a national level with our partners with the National Restaurant Association and American Hotel and Lodging Association and the RV Campground Association to enact the CARES Act and now the Flexibility Act to fix the challenges with the PPP. And as you've probably read, the PPP had lots of issues, but in particular, it was very challenging for our industry that was mostly closed down. Our folks were not able to really leverage those dollars because of the June 30th deadline and the need to bring back 75% of their workforce to get at those monies and take advantage of that loan. But now, happily, with the fix that was made a week ago to that program, the extension being made to the end of the year will greatly help with that. So we've had to really flex and be able to be nimble to work towards some of these different legislative issues, both on the state and the national level, that will impact our industry. And right now, we're really looking towards the safe opening, really, again, in multiple phases. We know that, as you heard, our displeasure for the June 1 announcement of patio outdoor-only dining options for our restaurant folks. That was a huge disappointment and surprise for us, given the many conversation we had been having about the urgent need to get these businesses reopened to address this precipitous fall and disaster that was really awaiting with more permanent closures. And knowing that outdoor dining only doesn't work for most of our folks around our state. And so with the address of last week to be able to move to a 50% occupancy reopening of indoor dining, that was a really good step forward. And Wednesday here this week was a big day for a lot of our folks to be able to start to get back to some semblance of normalcy and to offer really a safe reopening for customers. You know, hospitality is in a great position to help us heal a lot of challenges right now in our country and in our communities, and bring people together that can really be a wonderful opportunity for health and well-being and addressing some of the community challenges that we're all facing. And so those are some of the things that we've been working on, and I'll pass it over to Ann now, who can share a little bit more about what we've been doing from here.
Thank you, Liz. Again, my name is Ann Kirby-McGill, and I spent last year with the organization as a consultant working with Liz on the merger, and decided to join to help build the new organization on January 1, so just in time to have every ball thrown up in the air. I just want to take a little bit of time on this dense slide to while we have a unified voice and we have sectors that come together under the umbrella of hospitality, there are some distinctions to their circumstances and how they've been impacted by COVID. So I just want to go through this very quickly. As Liz mentioned, particularly in the food service sector, very tight margins, high labor costs, it's highly regulated. It's the greatest percentage of businesses in the industry. And so when it's impacted, it's felt far and wide. Social distancing is a barrier to business because obviously restaurants and bars are places where people come together to get close to one another. And they're also highly leveraged businesses, and the closure meant they had minimal revenue opportunities. And as Liz said, they turned on a dime and tried to look at new models, and I'll speak to that in the next slide. But initially they were closed to all but takeout, and we worked early on to help advance some revenue opportunity by getting alcohol to go approved. And so that added a little bit to their revenue stream, but there were some businesses that tried takeout initially and it just didn't work for their business model, and so they throttled back on that. Phase 2, we had outdoor dining, maximum of 50 people, and then pretty closely following on with indoor dining at 50%, which we're seeing this week, maximums of 250. And it's meant a huge change up in their internal operations around PPE and social distancing and how they structure their spaces. So there's a lot of activity going on to try to figure out how they can bring people in safely, but they're doing it. Hotels and motels were deemed an essential business right away, but of course, all of their amenities were closed down. Their pools, their fitness centers, if they had gift shops, if restaurants, anything like that. We know from industry research that they're running between 5 and 20% occupancy, depending upon where they are. And highly, obviously, dependent on business travel, which is screeched to a halt. They're highly regulated. They facilitate social distancing, so there is that. They can be used that way. And they are, as we'll see in the next slide, some new social service contracts that are helping them fill some rooms. They, again, essential accommodation initially, but no amenities. Golf courses did open on April 18th. That helped some. Outdoor dining helped them where they have restaurants, and then indoor dining, pools opening, meeting rooms, salons. This week is seeing some movement. So resorts and campgrounds, I'm going to sort of work together because we have year-round resorts and seasonal campgrounds. And while the hotel portions of resorts were deemed essential and could operate as the hotels did, the question about whether or not they'd be able to open up to seasonal guests was in question for a long time, and that makes it difficult to get prepared. They also rely heavily on their deposits as a way to get amped up for the coming season, and when people were canceling and they had to refund or book to next year, it's been changing what they have to work with in terms of their cash flow. As we know, resorts and campgrounds are impacted by the weather. They have a short season, and seasonal businesses have about a 4-month run to make their annual income. So they were facing big challenges and a lot of unknowns and uncertainty about whether or not they would actually get to open at all this summer. So the fact that they have been able to open, recreational camping is now open, pools are now open, and most of the reports we're hearing this week is that it's hard to find a campground space, particularly if you want to come in with an RV into the RV parks. They're doing pretty well, though they're having to make a lot of operational adjustments to keep people socially distanced and away from congregating activities. So they're learning to operate in a new way. And then finally, of course, there are allied businesses. This is, you see the scope and scale of this work. It's, from toothpicks to boat launches. They're like nearly every business in some way. The utilities, there's a ripple effect about what is happening to all of the businesses that rely on their relationship with businesses in the hospitality industry to make their margin. So we're working with all of them to figure out how to best navigate this. And so some of what Liz had referred to earlier is, sort of the way in which they're responding and finding new ways to operate. Takeout has been a really good thing for a lot of them. In fact, they're probably slowing their return to full service because they've got now an operational bent going that is working for them. Until they can be assured that they can operate safely as full service, they're going to stick with takeout. We have folks who had products that people were missing, and so they turned to partners to put products on shelves. One great example is a bar and restaurant in Mankato who had a chicken wing sauce that everybody was missing, so they worked with a bottler to get that out. So they're finding some new ways to open up some revenue streams. Additionally, and you might have seen this, some of the independent restaurants are also kind of setting up small grocery stores or CSAs inside their restaurants to be able to bring the products of their farmers and the other producers that they rely on to the public. If they can't do that through their food service, then they want to make sure that they're creating an avenue for those products to get out as well. So some of that is happening. And then, as I mentioned, people have been trying some things and stopping them when they realize they don't really work with their model. We are seeing a lot of meal kits coming out of restaurants where they're putting together meals for families of 4 or 6, and particularly around the times of the holidays. So Mother's Day, Memorial Day, we saw some restaurants open just to do that thing. Hotels and motels, we got calls early on. There were counties particularly that were interested in contracting with hotels to facilitate social distancing with their people in their facilities, particularly people experiencing homelessness. The American Hotel and Lodging Association had a nationwide initiative called Hospitality for Hope, and it was a way of connecting organizations to hotels that were willing to open their properties in that way, and more than 200 hotels across Minnesota participated in that. Resorts have been looking at longer term rentals, people calling and looking for a month or a 2-month rental where, you know, previously they might have gone for a weekend or a week, or they might have gone further away, overseas or to the coast or something. Tailoring activities to social distancing, this is similar for campgrounds. And then allied businesses are finding some ways to cross-sell products they thought worked one way, they're finding are working other ways, and they're looking for new opportunities. So as we continue to help our businesses navigate, the big thing is helping them build consumer confidence. And this is going to be about what they exhibit in terms of their operational practices around safety and social distancing and sanitizing. And it really is going to, the next wave is going to be about consumers feeling comfortable enough to come back. And we sort of think about it in, there are a third who are going to go back right away. They're comfortable and they're not questioning. There's a third who are going to go back probably not for a long time. And then there's a third in the middle who are going to watch the early adopters, and they'll start to wade in, and we'll just see how quickly that accelerates and what that means for the public health management of COVID and the decisions about opening further. So we're certainly keeping an eye out for the downline hiccups and how we can help businesses prepare for navigating those. Continuing to press for the expansion to full opening safely. And then we have sort of before the merger, I think our primary leadership positioning was around our legislative advocacy and policy work. And so we'll continue to use that to seek policy change in the economic relief programs, and then look to developing new products and service supports for our members, both to navigate this, but also, as Liz indicated, to respond to this new world order of life after COVID in the hospitality industry. And so I think I will turn it back over to Liz to finish up. You're mute, Liz.
There we go. Thank you. So in closing, yeah, there's a bunch of work that yet needs to be accomplished here. Certainly, you know, we were just beginning to think about how we would endeavor to do some new things with the merger opportunity when the pandemic hit. So I think, as I said at the top, and we've mentioned throughout, the flexibility here and truly being ready for anything is key. And that will continue to be so. You know, we anticipate that this industry will be radically changed in many ways, as we know many industries will. But the advent of this crisis has really mandated people to think innovatively about their operations and what they can do to garner some cash flow at a time when there just hardly is any to be had. And certainly, as Ann said about policy, looking at things longer term that will help these companies stay afloat. This is not going to be a quick fix. This industry has really been irreparably harmed, and this will be many years in terms of recovery. And some we already know are not making it, as we've seen closures, permanent closures already announced. So it's a heartbreaking time, especially for folks who have poured their life, work, and their passion into their businesses, many of these small businesses. And so we're doing everything we can from a policy standpoint to be able to support them. And certainly as we think about the responding to the new landscape and the new models that will come, we know that with the advent of takeout and this whole delivery model, that's going to be something that will continue well into the future as we address the continuum of people who are going to be reluctant to venture out. So I think preparedness is key here for folks to consider as they move into the future with continued reopening. And certainly we look to really steward some of these relationships that we have been able to bring along during this crisis. And in that way, you know, partnerships that we've developed with our friends at the Craft Brewers Guild and the Minnesota Licensed Beverage Association, and certainly our national partners to help us through this has been really important and a great, I think, underscoring of the collaborative spirit that this community has and the recognition of how great hospitality is for people and what it means for civic mindedness, community spirit, and really the fabric of all of our communities and bringing people together. So we're certainly thinking about the future in terms of what we can do longer term to make sure our businesses not just survive, but thrive. But I guess, again, the key watchword is the anticipation of what could be next and doing our best to anticipate that and help our members know how they can also anticipate the future, even in a world where, ironically, the year is 2020 and our vision is hardly 2020 when we know what's ahead. So again, we're doing our best to make sure that folks are able to survive this challenge. And with the reopening, further reopening this week, and hopefully soon increased opportunities to reopen more fully, those recoveries will be able to really truly hit the stride that's needed to make this industry whole again. And it's just going to take time. And so I think my charge to everybody here on the call is do everything you can to support these businesses to make sure they survive and they get the support from their friends and families to do that. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Liz. Thanks, Ann. We're going to have questions later on, so I'm just encouraging everybody to have questions to use the Q&A section. But before we get to that now, we'll turn it over to Bruce Newstad, the President and CEO of the Minnesota Retailers Association. He'll speak for a few minutes and then we'll have questions for everyone. So just encouraging everybody to think of questions, and I'll turn it over to Bruce.
Hey, great. Thanks, Joel. Appreciate it. As Joel said, my name is Bruce Newstead. I'm the president of the Minnesota Retailers Association. And as the name suggests, we're a collection of retailers across the state, about 1,200 storefronts, of which about a third are what you'd probably consider Main Street, more mom and pop type businesses. About a third are national brands, and about a third are kind of everything in between. We call them regional retailers because we don't know what else to call them, but sort of your mid-size retail pool. So just thanks so much for the opportunity to join you today. I've got a few minutes on just an update on what's going on in the general retail industry. I do want to just start out though by thanking Shannon and the Twin West Chamber and the Minneapolis Regional Chamber too. We had a blog post actually a couple weeks ago. And the basis of it was that really local chambers and local government are saving Main Street today. And that's no disrespect to the great work that's being done at the federal level and thankfully by our state partners as well. But really some of the innovations that we're seeing in marketplaces to make sure things can work and make sure some of the things that Liz mentioned can be put in place are thanks to the great work of the local chambers and their local government partners. So just a big thank you there. I should also mention, it's so great to see Victoria Marley again. Outside of Lyndon Carlson, Representative Carlson, who's been around Twin West for a long time, Victoria, you might be one of the more loyal Twin Westers that are around. So thanks for your great work. And Shannon, thanks for your work as well. I'm going to go through just a few slides here just to give us a little bit of an update on what's going on in retail. So just a quick refresher. On March 27th, all your non-essential stores closed here in Minnesota. We worked early on with the governor and his staff to try to get to some type of curbside and delivery option that occurred on May 5th. And then we saw a general reopening of retail on May 18th to in-store customers at about 50%. I think, as Liz and Ann mentioned, certainly this has been a time of trial and tribulation, also a time of innovation and opportunity. Like everybody and like all your businesses as well, we're eager to get back to some type of new normal, and we'll talk about that toward the end. I think what's interesting on this slide is when we went to curbside on May 5th, we estimate about 40% of retailers actually initially took advantage of that. Some retailers had to retool their operating model to get some type of operating open for curbside and delivery. And then fast forward to May 18th, we think probably about 65 to 70% of retailers actually reopened their doors on the 18th. And we're probably close to 90 to 95% right now, and hopefully getting closer to 100. So lots of work, as Liz and Ann said, there's lots of work to be done. It's interesting in these roles. You sort of celebrate the moments really quick, and then you move on to the next challenge because things get kind of level set again. I figure you've probably seen this chart before used by the governor. It sort of shows the intersection of where things come together, where key decisions can get made. I figure, frankly, the state probably paid a consultant a lot of money to develop this, so I like to use it as well. So we like to kind of redraw it toward when our consumers going to be comfortable spending. So we relabel it factors to lead to consumer spending. We take public health and we relabel it what's the perception around the health risk of interacting in the community today. We take social distancing and we call it actually what's your COVID-19 plan as a business. And then we take well-being and we talk about what are the products that are available, and then quite frankly, what's the impulse, what's the motivation to buy or to stop at a store. So we like to sort of take this chart and redraw it, and we think the governor is exactly correct in that in the middle there where it's Minnesota, that's what causes people to go out and shop and buy and dine out and do those things that they would normally. So really the things you can control in that I think is interesting, and this doesn't matter if you're a retailer or a manufacturer. The things you can control are really your COVID plan and how are you managing your products and motivating folks to feel comfortable and shop in your store. The thing you can't really manage is the perception of health risk, although your COVID-19 plan works into that. So anyway, I love to use this because I figure we probably paid somebody a lot of money to do it, so I love to redraw that one just for folks. I want to touch on just real quickly in retail, because everybody asks us, what are people actually buying today? And so this is some quantitative research that was done by a company called Viabil, and it just shows there's been a real big increase in fashion purchases, which I guess isn't probably too surprising. We've all spent about 2 months looking at ourselves in Zoom windows, looking at our clothing, looking around us and trying to figure out, what else we could do to update our Zoom look, et cetera. About a big 50% increase in computers and accessories. That's probably no surprise. I bet most people on this Zoom actually have bought an accessory or something like that for their home office in the last couple months. About 34% increase in health and wellness. Again, probably no surprise there. And then a pretty decent boost in home and garden as well. So it just gives you a little snapshot. That's sort of across the country what people are buying today at retail outlets. What we think is really interesting is sort of our anecdotal research here in Minnesota surrounding what Minnesotans are buying and purchasing. And so we're seeing a tremendous amount of furniture purchases. Again, that sort of makes sense as we spend a little more time in our homes and think to ourselves, well, I can't go and stay in one of Liz and Ann's properties on my staycation, so I'm going to invest in that couch that I've always wanted. So we're just seeing some of those types of decisions. Bikes and fitness equipment are hot right now, certainly landscaping and nursery. Everybody I know has planted a tree. Home goods are big and up right now. And of course, food for home preparation, either through your food retailer or your restaurant, that's been real innovative along those lines too. So those are kind of the key Minnesota sectors we're seeing. And then we talk to retailers about where are your opportunities right now? Where should you be thinking about your products? This is kind of the area we tend to look at. Liz and Ann mentioned sort of next steps, and I want to spend just a couple minutes on that before we get to Q&A. I want to thank both the Twin West Chamber and the Minneapolis Chamber. We came out with a plan that we were able to work with the governor on, sort of like what are the immediate short-term and midterm steps for retailers. And we've had a fair amount of success. This is just another quick look at that relative to getting through the plan. I'm going to talk about emergency loans toward the end here, but I just want to point you down toward the end of that screen. Long term, is a real focus of this industry, and I know all industries right now, because believe it or not, there is going to be a day when there is not an executive order that tells you exactly what to do and how many customers you can serve. And I think for most of us, we long for that day, and we hope it's actually really, really soon. So we've now sort of in the retail sector turned our attention to what does that long-term look like? What's an operating model where consumers will feel confident, because COVID is going to stick around, but quite frankly, executive or emergency orders won't. So we're really working hard on what's that kind of post-executive order look at things, and then really what's the post-pandemic look too. And I think that's where we're seeing a lot of industries spend a lot of time and attention. And there's been a lot of lessons learned over the last couple months, but a lot more for us to learn as well. So there are some next steps I want to make sure I just mention really quick. Liz touched on it, emergency loans and the program that the state had early on. We're big supporters of some continued funding of that program, but as Liz mentioned, in a more broad sense. So we're hopeful for those elected officials on the call. I think there's some agreement on a state loan program. Really, it's a grant program that does have a much more expanded base of participation of really all small businesses, not just a particular sector. So hopefully we'll see that taken up and picked up on during a special session. That's money that comes from the CARES Act. It'd be really helpful to a lot of business owners. And again, really the impetus is that if you're impacted by COVID, you're eligible to get into the pool for a drawing for a grant. And it's a fair amount of money. It doesn't fix things for everybody. It certainly takes a good step in helping with the CARES money. So I want to thank, I know Senator Paul Anderson's been just a great champion of this program in your area, Shannon, and Representative Zach Stevenson on your northern edge has been fantastic. And we know folks like Representative Robbins and Senator Pratt, and certainly the Deed Commissioner, Steve Grove, has been phenomenal on that as well. So as we hit special session, we know there's a lot of stuff to talk about. And we hope some of these kind of core COVID things remain priorities as well as we talk about police reform and other things. But there's just a lot of folks to thank for their hard work. It's not easy to run a retail operation or be in government or even run a chamber of commerce right now. So we look forward to seeing what that new normal looks like, hoping we can get there sooner than later. So again, I just want to end by just, as Liz did, thanking folks for supporting your community retailers. There's about 50,000 retailers across the state. It does have a profound impacts on sales tax collections and income tax. Shannon, I saw you at a presentation the other day. I saw a write-up on it. I think it was for a Rotary Club talking about Fed Reserve numbers and just how far down we are actually in from an economic whole perspective. And I think the stuff that you focused on was around wages and how kind of the wage capacity we have lost over the last couple of months. And I'm hopeful we can get to a spot where we can recoup and Minnesota does a pretty good job at recovery, hoping we can get to a spot where we can allow that recovery really, really soon. So anyway, thanks for the time to be with you today. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Bruce. Appreciate it. Well, it's time for questions and some are rolling in. I thought I'd ask one quick question to the entire panel first. And then we'll get to these Q&As that are rolling in now. So I appreciate that. Keep thinking of your questions, keep sending them, we'll get to them. I thought I'd start just with something that I heard through the presentations, and thank you, very interesting presentations. But I wonder if I could share, from what I heard, the importance of consumer confidence, especially like you said, eventually these lockdowns will end, people will be back to doing what they do. I wonder if I could share, though, an interesting survey I found this week, and it kind of got me thinking along these lines, if you'll bear with me for a little bit here. It was a Zagat survey called, you may have seen it, called The Future of Dining, and it was taken in the field from May 13th through the 27th. But they asked people about would they come out again and what's the biggest inhibitors? And I thought that was pretty interesting. And a few of the highlights, 3 and 4 said safety is the biggest issue and the deterrent to coming out to dining again. It far outweighed financial considerations. On top of that, outdoor seating and reduced capacity was most likely to increase their comfort level. 3/4 said they would be more likely to visit if they had that available. But as you know, in Minnesota, that's a short window to have outdoor dining, obviously. But then 84% of respondents said restaurants operating at full capacity would make them less likely to come. Another was that 2/3 of all respondents would wait more than a week even after restaurants reopened to even try to come out. But 93% of those said they'd be closer to a month to wait, and 20% of them would wait over 3 months to come. So just throwing those broad statistics out there, I wonder if you could respond to, it's important that obviously we lift these restrictions, and that will come obviously with time, but what can the industry do to kind of restore some of that consumer confidence? You know, restrictions being lifted, you still have to, you know, encourage them to participate again. And some of the fears about COVID might keep them from doing that even when the restrictions are lifted. So I'm going to field that to anybody who wants to take it.
Okay, Joel, I'll jump in here. And
Okay.
you know, those are great points. And I think Ann alluded to that there's going to be a continuum of hesitancy. Some people eager to get right back out, others are going to hang back, and others are probably way down the line, maybe for a long time, maybe not until there's a therapeutic intervention available will they even consider, you know, going back to a restaurant. And we acknowledge and recognize all of those are fine. We know that safety is a key focus for this industry, always has been pre-COVID. Certainly our industry was already doing best practices and safety protocols before shutdown, as the CDC was issuing guidance on enhanced, sanitization, and then we all started to learn more about social distancing. And certainly, I think we'll be seeing this play out as people do venture back and they see firsthand, again, I think as Ann mentioned, the different protocols in place. The staff wearing masks is a great example of that visible care that's being given. And then just having visited a restaurant myself Wednesday night to see the new paradigm of disposable menus, nothing on the table in terms of shared condiments, salt and pepper shakers and the like. The staff bringing your box to box your own leftovers, all of those different pieces that they will see and experience. And, and I think, again, that's building the customer confidence to know that they're being well taken care of. And one of the aspects that we have been promoting as we looked at our work on reopening guidance is what we call kind of a shared promise that the proprietors offer to their customers to indicate their care and concern about safe practices to make sure that their customers stay safe. And in turn, the customers make a promise back to say that they will abide by the new paradigm and the new guidelines so that they also keep the employees and the operators safe. So it is a two-way street in many ways. And we do really think that if people enter into a relationship like that and know that they have to meet both directions together in the middle, that will go a long way to building that customer confidence and getting more people encouraged to come out and enjoy another night of dining that they're so longing for after 86 days of not being able to be in an indoor restaurant.
Yeah, certainly.
Right, Joel, just real quick, I think, like Liz said, it's incumbent upon us as industry groups to think about what the future looks like. Again, executive orders won't be around forever. I said to my members when Wisconsin Supreme Court overturned the governor's executive orders there, that didn't make COVID go away. The consumer is really the pivot point in all of this, as Liz said, not rules and regulations. So we have to it's incumbent upon all of our groups and all of our chambers of commerce to help build the model going forward.
And I would just add one thing that people will experience, particularly restaurants, they'll experience them differently. A lot more people are cooking at home. And so chefs and restaurateurs are responding to that by, giving them almost everything up to the plate. And then, you finish it off at home and have sort of the restaurant experience in your own home. And we'll see more of those kinds of responses.
Great. Thank you. Changing topics, we have a few questions coming in. I'm going to lump them together, but they have to do with public safety issues. how concerned are you about public safety issues, especially as it deals with civic unrest that we've seen? I'm lumping a bunch of questions together, but how do you, A, what is the impact? And B, one of the questions is what can we do to help them recover as well? And I'll field that to anyone who wants to answer that one. And there wasn't anyone specifically mentioned for that question. Any comments or thoughts on that?
So maybe just, Joel, real quick, sticking with the customer again. I like to pivot on public safety to the customer. Well, certainly it's important that we protect property and those types of things. And I think we had some real challenges, obviously, in Minneapolis and parts of St. Paul on that. And that's going to have a deep impact going forward relative to decisions that retailers make relative to rebuilding and what it looks like. You're going to have some retailers say, you know what, this is my opportunity to truly rebuild. And given everything that's going on, I'm going to remake my model, and they're going to embrace that. You're going to have a section of retailers that just try to restore things to the way they were before the unrest. And then you've got a section of retailers that are just, quite frankly, aren't going to make it. And we have to really work as an industry to figure out what goes into some of those spots to keep those neighborhoods vibrant. But I think public safety is certainly important at its very core. It's about, you know, if you go back to basic public safety, how do you keep people safe? And how do you respond in times of strife? But more on the long term, how do you ensure things look good and work good for the customer? Because again, the business owner can feel good about the safety around their store, whether that's COVID or other more physical security, but the customer has to feel really confident in it too. And I think that's the piece we've missed a little bit on the Minneapolis-St. Paul recovery unrest component is, you know, let's think about how we're going to get consumers back to feeling good about shopping in those neighborhoods.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would just add on to that. Bruce makes great points there. And one of the, I think, ongoing challenges for the downtowns in particular, because all of our event business is closed down at the same time. And we know that we need to have safe communities to be able to encourage groups to bring their events to our areas. So those are all things that work together, and it will be incumbent upon all of us to make sure that we find the best new model that's going to help with this recovery. You know, right now, the downtown still with a lot of workers remote. There's virtually no lunch business. The dinner is difficult too as it relates to restaurants. And the hotels, as you well know, have been at an occupancy rate that's, you know, well under normal. It's been 10, 20% for a long time now. And so again, all of those things working together to ensure safety of the customers as well as the employees is going to be really, really important to spur this recovery.
I would just add too, as we've seen in the unrest, the way the community has drawn together. I know our organization has gotten calls from other organizations that we haven't generally worked with in the past who are like, how can we help? So there's an initiative with the American Institute of Architects Minnesota chapter helping restaurants. It's not about the safety related to the unrest, but the safety related to COVID. How can they offer their expertise? And we're getting those calls from the city of Minneapolis on a program to see what they can do to help bring people downtown and make that easier for them. So there is that sense of community spirit about everybody trying to work together to meet the challenge.
Right.
And Joel, I might just add a little bit to that. The question regarding civil unrest and what's happening. To Bruce's point, the kind of an opportunity that Twin West has now in the consolidation with the Minneapolis Regional Chamber is that Jonathan Weinhagen, the president of the Minneapolis Chamber, co-chairs now the Recovery Task Force, the Mayor's Recovery Task Force. And so what we're hearing and what we're seeing are really a lot of efforts on creating opportunities for the model to look very different than before. So opportunities for many of our minority-owned businesses that were impacted in that area in Broadway and Lake Street to actually be able to have ownership in some of these buildings going forward. And so there are a lot of really good efforts. I would just say that
the sentiment is really to make sure that it's community focused, that those that have been impacted, that there's trust and respect built within those communities around how making sure that that's front and center on the redesign and the opportunities. So we're really pleased to be a part of it, but it's also, there are great organizations like Lake Street Council that are doing a tremendous job. And so it's all going to take tremendous partnership and collaboration to do this. I know we've gotten a lot of members that have been reaching out to say, what can I do? There are rebuilding funds that are being lifted up and raised up. And so continue to watch that. We'll continue to put that out there. Volunteer efforts, those types of things. We anticipate there'll be further coordination in that going forward as well. So.
Okay, great. I wonder if there are additional thoughts about employment in this sector too. As you know, 11% of all private employment is in the hospitality sector in Minnesota. Some data that I saw too, obviously, leisure and hospitality was hit the hardest. Some statistics just for the Twin Cities showed that overall arts, entertainment, recreation, accommodations, it dropped 54% from March to April. But within that sector, the full service restaurants dropped to 74% in the Twin Cities, from 60,000 people working in the industry to just 16,000 in April. I wonder if you could expand, it's kind of an open-ended question, just on thoughts about those people working in this industry and how important it is to our economy. But then any thoughts about what we can do to help those people who work in this industry? Obviously, it depends upon that consumer confidence, people coming back again. But I wonder if you just have some general thoughts about employment in the hospitality industry.
Sure. Well, as I mentioned, it is a huge number, and you did too. A lot of people furloughed, and folks are starting to bring them back. We have some additional headwind, however, with the additional $600 unemployment benefit from the CARES Act that makes it more difficult, quite frankly, to bring some folks back right now. That's a shorter term issue, but we certainly are hoping that these jobs will still be there as these businesses recover. The longer term employment opportunity also exists to do some transitional work, and we've also been talking with other groups that need workers, in both the shorter term and longer term. For example, the senior care industry needs cooks, they need servers, they need all of those kinds of people. So there's a real opportunity to, parallel and work with those kinds of organizations to help employees that have been displaced find employment in other areas where they have skills and gifts. And, certainly there's a lot of work around the employee was immediately in terms of supporting folks and making sure that they were well supported with unemployment, and certainly the CARES Act helped with that, with the PPP, to be able to bring people back as this industry recovered. So, again, as we think about our education foundation that I mentioned up front, being able to build a pipeline of young people that can transition into lots of different jobs, across this industry, and really use those well-learned skills in high school to good effect as they move into the job market. And it'll be, again, in everybody's best interest to make sure that we do everything we can to support these businesses through legislative support, financing, and so forth, to be able to bring employees back into the fold.
And Joel, maybe not an answer to your question, but a little more perspective, especially for folks in businesses on this Zoom. There's probably somewhere in the area of 780,000 Minnesota jobs that depend on the success of Liz's industry and my industry and other related industries. So it's actually not just about those folks that are working in our stores and restaurants. It's about the velocity of that job too. So again, the sooner we can get back to a safe normal, we'll have a far-reaching impact across Minnesota on all jobs.
Yeah, Bruce, that's a great point. And, Ann, I think, talked about our allied groups, and it's such a impact. So for every core job, how many other jobs are supported? You make a great point, because it is truly an ecosystem that we support with this industry, and there's lots of tentacles that not always are thought about as we consider some of the legislative help that's needed, but all very much interrelated and interdependent. And certainly your industry is an integral part of this as well.
One other quick question, we'll get it in here if we can. There's a question, what are the biggest differences in regards to hospitality and retail trends when it comes to metro versus outstate? Maybe, outstate, maybe they'll fare better. Outdoor activities, camping, that fits right in with our social distancing. Do you see some differences there where some sectors might actually show some improvement and increased demand? Can you talk to the differences about how this is affecting cities versus outstate areas?
Yeah, well, I think Greater Minnesota is well positioned to take, I'll say, advantage of the current social distancing. Certainly, the great outdoors and more rural space is a natural for that to occur, and we've been saying that since the beginning. And that is really honestly why it was so vexing to not be able to open our campgrounds in times for Memorial Weekend, when that is a third or a quarter of the revenue for some of these operators to come in the door. And and we've all seen some of the trends with RV campers sales going through the roof. Again, talking about these longer term rental opportunities as people see, the safety benefit of being able to be with their family in a location for a longer amount of time and be able to be self-contained in some cases with all their facilities in one spot and not having to need, a shared services in that regard. So certainly the regional aspect of this is an opportunity, and we've seen fewer COVID cases, as we all know, in some of these greater Minnesota counties. There's been very few, and so that offers that kind of peace of mind, I think, to folks as well. And the more dense cities, that has always, given some more pause to people, and the social distancing in some cases doesn't come as easily. But again, I think we'll see the new practices as everyone ventures out more to be able to embrace the protocols and the social distancing, even in a place like, downtown Minneapolis or St. Paul, for example.
And just a quick add on to that, recovery on its own will vary by region of Minnesota. I think if you're in Marshall, Minnesota, your COVID deaths and cases look different than Minneapolis. Yep. And so I think the big impact, Joel, there is going to be on recovery and how you see, again, to pivot back to the consumer, you're going to see hopefully recovery in some of these areas that have less of an impact much, much quicker. So that's our hope, is that there's a big recovery impact. We certainly want everybody to recover, and you got to create the conditions in which people can operate to the fullest extent that they can safely. But hopefully we'll see some of that impact and how it plays out in recovery.
It is a little bit different though. I'll just take resorts, for example. Some of those are doing okay, even at 60 or 70% what they think they might do this year. We've heard from some others that are very interdependent on families coming from throughout the US for multi-generational reunions. And in some cases, those businesses are down 90% because people just aren't traveling. And some of those cancellations have some pretty long tails into the fall. And as you think about the resort industry, it's been a declining industry, kind of like farming for the last 10 years or so. And it's already vulnerable. So some of these impacts are going to be felt for a long time, and the ability for these folks to make up the revenue that they've lost this summer are going to be, a challenging.
Okay, great. If in the interest of time, maybe I'll kick it back to you, Shannon, unless you want me to ask any more questions there.
Yeah, we still have quite a few questions, but we really do want to be respectful of everyone's time and try to wrap up by 9 o'clock. I might close just with one final thought, because we hear this a lot. There's a lot of uncertainty right out there in everything that we're doing. There were quite a few questions on the thread about what if there is another COVID outbreak? What is this going to do to the industry, and how do we handle that? That might be what I think it's more important that we have that question, and then all wrap up much faster. So any thoughts on that?
Just real quick, my hope is that the model we operate under today is the COVID model, and going forward we can get beyond what the model looks like today. Having said that, I hope that if we do see another outbreak, we don't fall back to completely closed again. I hope we learn some lessons as to how we're operating today, and we can fall back to something that looks more like today as opposed to completely closed. So that's how we sort of view a potential future outbreak anyways. We're all learning how to operate safely today, even in the midst of an outbreak, and I hope we can carry that forward.
Yeah, I would concur with Bruce's sentiment there. You know, Commissioner Malcolm has said many times, as has the governor, we need to learn to live with the virus. And it will be some time before we have that therapeutic intervention. So it's incumbent upon all of us to employ these best practices and again, really being able to leverage the insights and lessons that we've learned from this experience into the future. And as I said in my remarks, to be ready for anything, because I think if anything, all of us have learned through this is the ability to innovate on the fly, figure out how to make your business model work in unprecedented times. And I think all of us in the retail and hospitality industry are extremely hardworking, creative, and just dedicated people that want to figure this out. And at the end of the day, they want to welcome their customers back, and they want to keep that connectivity with their community members going. So I'm heartened by the fact that we are definitely learning from this challenge, and hopefully we will not have this clawback, but I think everybody is going to be much more prepared going forward if it should happen.
Great. Okay, so thank you, Joel, for moderating and for your continued partnership from Finance and Commerce. To our panelists, Liz, Anna, and Bruce, thank you for the great work that you do each and every day. If there's things that I heard today, tremendous amounts of resiliency, innovation, reinvention. This is happening in the smallest of smallest retailers and hospitality vendors. So whether that be a restaurateur, an entrepreneurial retailer, our hearts go out to these two industries, especially because we know how significantly impacted they've been. I would say to all of you that are on the screen or on the call, making sure that you continue to support these great businesses and all of the great aspects that they drive our local economy, employ people, and make the livelihood that we have that was so rich and vibrant here in our region. So as we go forward, we'll continue to do a lot of virtual programming. The same way that Bruce said earlier, Chambers of Commerce are also reinventing how we deliver better to you, our members. Our number one priority is creating high quality programs and services, as well as a voice to represent you at the legislative level, which is why we do events like we are doing today. So I'd encourage you to stay engaged and involved with us and help us shape what the future of now our consolidated chamber is going to look like. There are still numerous visioning sessions that we'll have coming up that you can share some insight into this. But then also on your screen, there are numerous events that we have, most of them virtual still, but one that isn't, we are still looking forward to our golf outing on August 17th. It's amazing to me when we hear about consumer confidence. We've had an overwhelming interest this year more than ever in the golf outing, and I'm thinking people are very interested, as you said, Liz, after whatever it was, 86, 89 days, whatever, to get out and actually experience our community and support one another. So I thank you all for being here with us. Continue to engage with us. Be well, be safe. We will also share all of these slides. So if that's okay with our presenters, which I'm guessing it is, we'll share the slides with those of you that attend or that registered, because many of you have asked for this great information to be sharing. So the final piece, our chamber is part of a coalition called Minnesota Ready, and we are actively working with the governor to continue to share the message that we need to to reopen business. Our economy depends on it. Our businesses are depending upon it. My heart is breaking for when I hear the stories of the companies that aren't going to be able to make it, that are closing their doors forever. And so we want to minimize that and mitigate some of those risks. So thank you again. Have a great Friday. We'll look forward to seeing you real soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.